Welcome back to another episode of Booze, Desserts, Smoke&Meats with your host, the Meat Viking.
And this is Professor Porkline, aka Dr. Chef Hubs, up in the house. What's going
That's
on, man?
right. Oh, another day, another dollar. I took a page out of your book and I got me a rum and coke.
You did a little rum and coke. Okay. Nice. Well, I figured because of the topic of today, I didn't put it into my cup, but, I got myself a nice little beer. So that's what I'll be drinking because that's what we're going to talk about today, man. We're going to talk about some beer.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured fitting. Why not?
Right. What would you say classifies a beer?
Well, a classic definition of beer is basically anything with barley, with yeast, water, and then you have your different grains. So I feel like that's kind of my definition on that one. I know that's not 100% true because I feel like you can get beer just about out of any grain. So, but it just depends on what type of beer you're looking for.
Indeed. And like when we talk about our basic beer, we're talking about like the things that contain less than like 5% beer. We're not talking about like those craft beers that are engineered to be drunk in a form of a shot that are like 22%.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're gonna have to split this up to another episode, maybe even next week as a follow up. But I figured we'd start talking about the ales, the lagers, and the pilsners, and not get into some of those craft beers that are kind of the same, but basically brewed as a higher ABV. We'll probably talk about that stuff later on because I know stouts can get pretty high. I know some ales can too, but I think that can be another episode. This one's kind of just more of, hey, here's your little introduction to beer. Here's your stuff, and see what you know already.
Right. And for those of you who don't know, you said a little acronym, which is ABV, and that is alcohol by volume.
Yeah. So that essentially will tell you how much alcohol is in it. So example with liquor, I think we can talk about that another time too. But if you have something that's 80 proof, you just divide that. So it's saying that it's 40% ABV. So if you get up to the really higher stuff like Everclear, it's 190 proof. That means it's almost 100% alcohol by volume. So the always trick is to always just cut it in half.
See, that's something I didn't know. Then again, I can't read good, so.
So I think I want to choose our safe word for today because it's going to be very fitting. Why not make it hops?
Okay, can you do a beer episode without mentioning hops?
No, you can't.
So that right there might be a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, but I feel like I could probably mention some of the different types of ones.
Okay.
Like I might be able to say, hey, we can get some Cascade or we can get some, Warrior, and then go from there.
You know what, foodies? Let us know if you're here for this. If we can try and find a word that we have to use in a podcast and intentionally avoid.
Yeah, that'd be kind of fun.
I'm kind of here for this.
I guess
it looks like we got a counter here. Good old today's safe word is hops.
Hops. So, you know a little bit of some history of beer?
I do not.
So, I did a little bit of some research because I kind of wanted to know a little bit more about because I brew beer and stuff, and one of the reasons why I wanted to do this today is because I actually brewed some beer yesterday, and that's going to be some real potent stuff. I'm calling it my Demigoddess Ale because it's supposed to be about 14%. So not to be the snobby kind, but it is kind of that homebrew craft brew that's going to be brewed to be really high potency.
Okay.
But there was a lot of accounts of beer that have been brewed throughout the years, and the very first one was really, really old, about 3,500 BC. Okay, and it was there was some evidence of this manufacturer, and it's been confirmed. that there's a lot of the Sumerians way back when were the ones that were first starting to brew it, and then obviously a little bit later on, the Chinese wound up doing it too. So it's recognized as something that's very old. Uh, and man, can you imagine drinking some of that stuff from way back when?
I I'm a little curious as to what it would taste like, because most beers that I've had, and this could just be my palate, all somewhat taste similar, with the exception of like your dark beers versus your light beers.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious as to what these taste like.
Well, typically these older ones are going to be your light beers because that's all they had. They didn't really have the chocolate, or the darker grains. So it's going to be a little bit more. And they also combined some of theirs too. Remember in the previous podcast we were talking about mead and how mead is the oldest fermented liquor or fermented beverage because honey was widely accessible. And then as we started getting into the cultivating of grains and everything, we got into the beer and then the liquor, the distilling. So with beer, it actually started because they were making bread, and
Yep.
the fermentation from bread as was basically a staple of, hey, this could be a thing here. And we know that yeast grows wild anyway, so having that stuff around kind of turns it into, hey man, let's see if this is going to be good enough. Now I'm almost curious to know if someone was making the bread, had some water or anything and had that yeast in there and was like, you know what, I'm going to drink this.
I mean, honestly, it's like I had a good thing for this too. There's like the person who made toast. Like, this bread's good, let's cook it again, you know?
But it's always funny too because that's how sometimes humans have learned what's good and what it isn't, is
Yeah.
watching people are watching animals eat.
Hmm.
What was it? The one thing I saw about how stuff can be eaten in the wild, and humans wound up watching either monkeys or squirrels or stuff like that, and saying, "Oh, well, they're eating it. It should be good enough for me." But then there's a couple times where that doesn't work out. Um, like I can't remember the food where you have to boil it twice. It's very dangerous for humans to eat, but if you boil it once, it's still dangerous. But if you boil it twice, it's good enough to eat.
Oh, I think I heard about this on another podcast actually, and I want to say it's a form of potato.
I can't remember which one it is, but
Yeah.
other things like mushrooms,
Yep.
things are very difficult to identify if you're not really good with it. And
Hmm.
people have eaten those and went, bleh.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Mushrooms, plants, like things that you find in the wild, unless you have like a book and are 100% sure you can identify that, probably don't stick that in your mouth.
yeah, so beer, it's still the same thing. Like I wondered who was sitting there going, yeah, we're gonna drink this and see what happens.
Yes.
And beers back then weren't made to be, um, high potency. It's not
Hmm.
like their beers are going to be 14% like the one I made yesterday. Instead they were basically like the wine, and the ales, to because it was safer to drink than it was with the normal water, because you have to boil it or you have to put it over a fire. So that kind of boiled all the bad stuff out of it, and then, hey, I'm going to drink this because it is water.
So, what you're trying to tell me is that there's a good chance they could have put like some berries and some honey in that, and they were drinking White Claws before White Claws were a thing.
Yeah. Well, again, if you have the fruit, you have the berries and stuff, the wild yeast comes from that. So
Yeah.
that's probably what they were doing, is throwing stuff in there to get us some flavor, and then not realizing that, hey, this could be fermenting.
Hmm.
Although, side note, I do like watching some of those videos of animals eating fermented fruits. Have you ever seen
Yes.
those?
Yep. Like the squirrel that gets drunk off the old pumpkin.
Yeah, or I
Yeah.
saw a raccoon the one time. That was pretty funny because he was like wobbling. He was doing definitely doing the Bernie, just all the way as he was going down.
Oh, it's such a classic movie. Weekend at Bernie, or is it Weekend at Bernie's or Weekend
Yeah,
with Bernie?
Weekend at Bernie's.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So beer has been around for a while, and then obviously it was in Egypt, um, and then coming into Europe, going through Greece, Rome, um, and a lot of the times they usually use that for celebrations too, but obviously there was wines and how that combined as well. But man, it's always that one joke saying like, I want to I've drank so much beer that I want to meet the person that invented beer and buy him a beer, or
Yeah,
woman, or woman, because I mean there definitely are a lot of women in history that have done that. So,
it's true. That is true.
which, here's another thing that I wound up reading a while back. You know where witches come from, right? And how
Wait,
that has a relationship to brewing.
I did not know this. I'm listening. Are you
Yeah,
talking about
so,
like brewing potions or like brewing booze?
well, kind of a little bit of both, because if you look at the lore behind it.
Okay.
So you know how witches, whenever they're making their brew, they have
Mm-hmm.
the big kettle, right?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people have big kettles when they're doing beer as well. And you know how they always have the big paddle to move
Mm-hmm.
everything around. I was talking about the kettles.
So,
They usually have the paddle.
so we got the cauldron and the paddle.
Yes. Um, so think about it. I mean, they have the cauldron, and
Mm-hmm.
then typically that's for your brew pot, and then they have the paddle just to stir. You're always throwing things in. Now, there is some truth behind all of that, and that there's a lot of connections when you're looking at that imagery of the witch just making the brew or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's really interesting how they've had their hand in brewing. Um, because again, back then, poor quality of water, it was a way of sanitizing it, a way of making things drinkable.
Yeah.
So, but this
Well,
whole entire thing of you seeing a woman in front of a kettle, throwing things in there, stirring it around, wearing a hat. It wasn't it was more of um, the old school 1600s hats that people would wear,
mm-hmm.
but something that kind of coned up a little bit. And then obviously people's imaginations made it go really long. And now you have your witch's brew, right?
Mm-hmm. I don't think the witches liked us talking about them because I'm going to leave this in here, but we had to stop the podcast about 4 or 5 times because we kept lagging out. So if that part of the podcast feels a little janky, I apologize. We had some issues.
Yeah. Technology is not fun when it doesn't work right.
There are a lot of fun things that aren't fun when they don't work right.
True.
So now I also wonder, while we're kind of still half on that topic of witches, uh, in their potion brewing, if they were using alcohol kind of unbeknownst as like a disinfectant or like a cleaner or just as like basic medicine. So say you have, oh, I don't even want to know. We'll just say you've got tea leaves and then you got ale and you put that together and then that fixes an upset stomach. I wonder if that's what they were doing back in the day.
Yeah, I couldn't even tell you, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
But I was just looking at some of the research of what the history behind it is,
Okay.
you know? So, but I feel like there's way more history, and I was just given the abridged version of it,
Oh yeah.
and I'm okay with that. But I feel as if you got to look at the different styles of beer. So
Exactly.
I think um, as you hear these different ones, and as these craft brews are starting to come around, you're starting to get into the crazier, like, hey, here's the New England IPA or the double hopped whatever. It kind of, you have to remember what some of those original ones were. And so an ale has a lot of different categories in it. You might be able to find a brown ale, pale, lighter ones. So do you enjoy ales?
Um, I wish I could say that I could. Every ale that I've had has always been almost well, have too much of that flower taste. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to use the safe word here, it's got a very hoppy taste, and that's something that I don't care for. However, I did like one
Man, typically
ale.
typically you don't have too many.
This one was like a Mad Hatter, is what it was called, and I think it was like specifically a very floral style beer. And I thought that paired well with spicy food, but it's not like my go-to.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about ales, at least in the brewing process, is that they're top ferment. So just like the name suggests, is that all the stuff happens at the top. So when you brew it, the crow's in and everything, all everything happens towards the top, and then it will die down to the bottom.
Hmm.
So this is where you get that barley, malt tea, boozy beverage, basically.
Gotcha. So ale
And they
is
also
trickle
like,
down economics, and everything else started from the bottom. Now we're here.
yeah, they're also better in warmer temperatures.
Hmm.
So typically when you pitch your yeast, you want to be within that 75, 85 range. I mean, you can go a little bit warmer if you want. I've definitely messed up when I first started in pitch degrees, and it still worked out. But
Right.
you don't want it so hot that it kills the yeast anyway.
Yeah.
So the ales are going to be better for warmer temperatures.
Okay.
So, now you've probably heard of lager before, right?
Yep. I am
Different
familiar with
style.
lager.
I mean, if you're in the United States and you're from the Northeast, I mean, lager is synonymous for Yingling. You
Yep.
go up to a bar, you don't say, "Hey, give me a Yingling." You just say, "Give me a lager,"
Yep.
which is really interesting.
Now, how far
But
northeast does that go?
I guess it depends on where they're selling at, because I know you can't get Yingling in Vermont, and they have
Okay.
something called Long Trail Ale, which is their version of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think definitely in Pennsylvania for sure.
Right.
You probably get it out in Ohio, maybe. I don't know. It's only been a couple years since Ohio's gotten Yingling,
Right.
so
Yeah.
that would be an interesting little poll, and say, hey, what do you call it, and
Mm-hmm.
and how far up do you get it to just stop?
Exactly. I know we've got a couple beer drinkers in here. What do you guys, when you go and get your beer, what do you, if you're at a bar, like what do you say? Hey, give me a lager or a stout. What do they hand you? And also, what beer do you prefer to drink? I know we haven't hit my topic yet, but when we do, I'll make sure I chime in with what I got.
Yeah, well, lagers are a little different because lagers are better for cooler temperatures.
Mm-hmm.
The yeast is better for cooler temperatures, and they usually are starting at the bottom. So when you said started from the bottom, now we're here, that's going to be your lager fermentation.
Yep.
It's very popular among places where it's a little cooler. Germany, Netherlands, mainly a lot of European countries because of the weather, and they make up a lot of their beer sales.
Hmm.
So you got to think of everything from the bottom doing their magic, and then poof, now you have all your stuff. And so what going back to the ales, there's obviously a couple different styles. I mentioned brown ales. They range in color, they have different flavors to them. You might get some nut notes, there might be some chocolate. They're usually kind of a mixed bag deal.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of different malts in different countries. It can be different flavors depending on where you're going. And then obviously you're going to have a pale ale. So this is more of the English style stuff, and they're more of the copper color, and they usually have more fruity scents with them. So they're definitely strong, and they certainly pair well with your spicy foods. So an American Pale Ale is something that's kind of a hybrid, but we won't talk about that one.
Right.
But what's your favorite one?
As far as lagers go, or as far as beer goes?
Well, I forget what you said before.
Yeah. So you were asking me, what do I prefer? And I was kind of trying to figure out if you meant like, what is my preferred beer of choice, or what is my preferred lager?
I think what you were saying before is we'll get to it when we get to it. What there? Is that your different choice, or is that your okay? Yeah. So what was your choice then?
As far as my choice go, I am a huge fan of stout beers.
Okay. We can talk about stouts if you want. I mean, yeah. I was wondering if we could do that another time because they go pretty good with porters, but
oh, okay. Yeah. Then we can get to that later. Yeah. That was a misunderstanding on my part. I thought we were gonna go like IPA, lager, stout. But if stout and porters could be their own thing, then we can cover that in another episode. And also, when I think stouts, too, it seems like stouts have become more and more craft based.
There's a lot of coffee stouts. There's a lot of chocolate, double chocolate stuff.
Yep.
So
I just had a double chocolate coffee bourbon barrel stout, and that's pretty good.
Kind of sounded like you just ordered from Starbucks, man.
I mean, like, that's what they're getting to nowadays, and it's getting a little ridiculous. Like, I had never heard of it until recently, but there's stuff called a sour beer, which is essentially like a light mead. And like, this is like, I'm a strawberry shortcake peach cobbler beer. And I'm like,
well, I mean, sours are definitely more the fruity side because they usually have a tang to them because they have usually fruits that are in that. I wasn't a big fan of sours or some of the more I've had a few in the last couple months that have just blown my mind.
Okay.
I had one that was in Kentucky, and it was called Blueberry. It was a blueberry cobbler sour ale. And man, it literally poured out into the glass, and it was so thick and chunky, and it was like I was drinking a blueberry cobbler dessert.
That's right.
So, but it wasn't. It didn't have that tang that I remembered as a sour. Because when I remember my first one, it was some raspberry sour, and that was just one that was too tangy on my mouth, and I'm like, I'll drink the rest of this, but I'm not going to have another one. So, but they're definitely popular. I mean, they're starting to get some really crazy stuff, just like you said. I'll have a double peach cobbler, blueberry whatever sour. Did you try one of those or no?
I have had a flight before that's had some sours on it, and I had one. I think it was supposed to be cheesecake flavored, if my mind serves me correctly, and it was
cheesecake
phenomenal. It was like sour strawberry cheesecake, I think, and this was going back. Oh well, before everything was shut down, so yeah. Pardon my memory for not remembering exactly what it was called.
No, you're good. I hear you. I'm just doing a little bit more research.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing. I got like a bunch of tabs pulled up.
A Pilsner, that's another one that's very light. And a lot of times with pilsners, it's a subspecies of lager, but they're very light. They're very neutral. If you really want to think of pilsner, like Miller Light, those are usually pilsners. They're very golden color. They're very see-through, clear body. They have something that you can just drink on a really hot day, and not get drunk.
Heard it here first. Pilsner's essentially water.
Yeah, I will agree with that statement.
Well, good.
So, what do you have? Do you have other things that on your research, your tabs?
Here's something that I didn't know, and that is, hold on, let me kind of read this. Essentially, back in Chinese society, they used to use alcohol as a preservative.
I mean, I could see that.
Mm-hmm. As an antidote for fatigue.
Whew, I don't know about that, man.
Right. Dude, I
drink enough alcohol, I get fatigued again.
Yeah, I get super tired super quick.
So,
what I've got pulled up basically is, let me pull it up over here to screen share with everybody. All right. So this is from a website called Alcohol Problems and Solutions. As you can see, I didn't make that up. It's right here. And this goes through the history of all sorts of stuff around the world. And I was kind of skimming through it when you were talking. It's kind of an interesting read here and there. If you want to like get a brief paragraph on society, this right here is actually where I commented that it was people in the society were using it as an antidote for fatigue. And this goes into the Greeks and their Greek deity of Dionysus, who, those of you who know a little bit about mythology, he's kind of like their, god of feast and banquets, and people who worshipped him often got super drunk, and that is that's a good friend to have. And then we go later down in here to like religion. You've got Hebrews and Judaism and alcohol, Persians, Romans. This goes into drinking games. Some practices encourage drinking, so much so that you would vomit to drink more. So we got early Christian period, talking about wine or grape juice. And then the further you scroll down in here, you get into brief paragraphs on things like champagne, whiskey, gin. It's kind of an interesting read. Y'all should check out. And once again, I just pulled that up by Googling
history of alcohol.
History, thank you. It's words. Because I got two monitors here and I can't fucking read it all. Yeah, history of beer and wine. And there you go. Website is from Alcohol Problem and Solutions.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
I feel as if we can chat more about other styles, because I mean, I feel like we could both talk a lot about porters, stouts, wheat beers, IPAs. That we can still have a whole nother episode of just some of the stuff out there.
Maybe what we'll do is we'll make this episode a two-parter, and we'll do our stouts, IPAs, and all of that next week.
Yeah, that could probably work out.
So, but you think you're going to call it on that one?
Yeah, I don't think we have anything else right now that would kind of go a little bit one, except for, anything that's relating to beer.
Did you see in the news that those distilleries that were making hand sanitizer might face a bunch of massive fines?
No, I did see that, and it doesn't relate to beer, but it does relate to alcohol in general. So yeah, man. Actually, one of the distilleries local to me did that. They wound up making a bunch of hand sanitizers. So I don't know if they're gonna get hit. I think it was like $14,000 or $14,000 fine, something
Mm-hmm.
high. So I hope not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I read that same thing too.
Yeah. Well, all the distilleries out there, we support you. If you want more eyes on your product, reach out to us. We will give you many praises for free drinks. Hell, I might even
Yeah,
give you a hug.
we'll have to we'll have to do a distillery episode
Mm-hmm.
one of these times too, because we've already talked about mead. We got beer covered. We're going to talk about wine. So I mean, distillery's got to be up there too.
Exactly. Well, you want to send us off then, good sir?
Yeah, man. Well, this is Professor Porkloin signing off,
And I've been the Meat
and my
Viking. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe.
so
Helps us out a whole lot. And share the video to anybody who you think might like this. So y'all have a good one, foodies.